This is a special episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Major news broke Friday night that the New York Jets have agreed to a one-year contract with eight-time Pro Bowl tackle Tyron Smith. Tyron Smith, one of the best tackles of his generation, is coming to New York to block for Aaron Rodgers. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes like this one as big news breaks. If you enjoy this show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening, or give this episode a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Really appreciate it. It helps other Jets fans find this show. During the course of this offseason and in the weeks leading up to it, I've talked a lot about how the Jets were going to have to take calculated gambles to get where they want to go. And I talked about how difficult it was going to be to fix this offensive line. And I expressed skepticism because, look, it's not easy to fix an offensive line where you need 3 of the 5 spots addressed in one offseason. The Jets are taking calculated gambles, and this is the biggest swing of the bat they could possibly take. And it is a swing of the bat that comes with a potentially game-changing reward, because Tyron Smith changes the trajectory of your offensive line if he gives you what you're looking for. He is, again, one of the best tackles of his generation. He is a rock-solid left tackle. And if you look at this Jets offensive line right now, with Tyron Smith projected at left tackle, John Simpson projected at left guard, Joe Tippmann projected as the center, Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard, Morgan Moses at right tackle. It's a line with some question marks. There's no question about it. Tyron Smith missed 37 games over the last 4 years. We can't ignore that. That's part of the reason he's available. Elijah Vera Tucker, serious injuries the last couple of years. Morgan Moses still playing well, but in his mid-30s, so is Tyron Smith. Joe Tippmann, how big of a leap is he going to take? John Simpson, what are you going to get from him? There are question marks all over the line. But if you look at it, there's potential for this line to be really, really good in a way maybe there wasn't a year ago. A year ago, the Jets were looking at like Dwayne Brown at left tackle and Mekhi Becton at right tackle, and it just made no sense. I looked at that and I remember thinking, there's no way this can work. There's a big way this can work. And Tyron Smith changes your offensive line. I think that there's going to be a multiplier effect with Tyron Smith next to John Simpson. When the Jets signed Simpson to play left guard just a couple of days ago, one of the things I said was, I think it's going to be really important to see who they get to play next to him, because John Simpson, there are some guards who are as good as the tackle next to them. If you get a bad tackle next to John Simpson, he's probably going to struggle. You put a guy as good as Tyron Smith next to Simpson, big things can happen. I've talked about how essential it is for the New York Jets to build the offensive line around Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers is still as smart as he ever has been. In fact, he may be getting even smarter on the field as he hits age 40. He just understands the most intricate things. If you listen to guys who have been in the huddle with him, they're just amazed by like how he'll notice like something about the stance of some safety, how that tips off coverages. What Aaron Rodgers is not going to be able to do, and this is going to be especially true now that he's recovering from an Achilles injury, is move around much. And one of the things that made Aaron Rodgers such an iconic quarterback was his ability to evade pressure, to move left and right. Rodgers, though, is still he can still read the defense. He's still going to be able to get the ball where it needs to go. He's not going to be able to move as well, though. So it was essential that the New York Jets addressed the offensive line. And the most important position on your offensive line is the left tackle, because he's left on an island one-on-one against elite pass rushers. But unlike the right tackle, a right-handed quarterback like Rodgers, and most quarterbacks are right-handed, cannot see the guy who's going up against the left tackle. He can see the guy that's going up against the right tackle. So if the right tackle gets beat, now if the right tackle gets beat clean, you got no shot. But if the right tackle gets beat a little bit, and the quarterback has the ability to step up in the pocket. That's not true at the left tackle position. You need somebody who's absolutely rock solid at left tackle. And I think about the New York Jets over the last year. I think about the offseason they had last year. And like the worst place you could be in the NFL is kind of like halfwaying things. You don't want to be a team that's pretending to be all in, but not really all in, like the New York Jets were a year ago, where the Jets are trading for Rodgers at 39. They're saying we're all in. They're like pushing all this cap space to the future, but they're using it on guys like Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, the other guys they brought in last year. What they did last offseason made me crazy, because I looked at that and I said, there's no way this could possibly work. This can work. This is a potentially game-changing move for the New York Jets on the offensive line. There are not many players in this league where you look at that, you look at this guy and you say, this guy's so good, he changes everything. He changes everything about this unit, the offensive line. He potentially changes everything about the offense. That's what Tyron Smith can do for the New York Jets. As we continue here on this special edition of Locked On Jets, we're going to talk in more detail about what Tyron Smith may bring to the Jets. We'll also talk about some of the early news we're getting about the contract, and contract's looking pretty favorable, folks. We'll break that down more as continuing this special edition of Locked On Jets. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What would you do if you had an extra hour in your day? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. And therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. Therapy has so many benefits. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to your busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on the big upset or the one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. If you're like me, your bracket's probably going to go down early. I always feel like I lose my Final Four the first weekend. Tournaments coming up, Selection Sunday just this weekend. In fact, part of the reason I'm on the road, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a different background, is going to see some conference tournament action on Saturday. Really excited about that, but even more excited for the upcoming NCAA tournament. If you want to make some money, just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Again, it's fanduel.com/lockedon. This is a special episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. We're breaking down the New York Jets agreeing to terms with tackle Tyron Smith, one of the best tackles of his generation, a tackle who I think changes expectations around this football team. Heading into this offseason, I felt like it was a long shot that the Jets were going to be able to add enough impact players to legitimately become a contender in the AFC. And look, I'm not going to say they're there yet, but this is the type of move. If it works out, it's going to work out in a big way for this franchise. It's going to lock down a critical position on the offensive side of the ball. Aaron Rodgers is not going to have to worry about being hit from his blind side. Rodgers had a guy in Green Bay who protected him for a long time, did an excellent job in David Bakhtiari. And by the way, that means Bakhtiari's not coming to New York, at least not as a starter. And that makes me delighted. And I'll be honest, this might be kind of silly to you if you've been listening to the show consistently. You know that I've been very, very, very anti-David Bakhtiari coming to New York because I just feel like it just looks like his body is falling apart. And as silly as this sounds, my first reaction when the Jets got Tyron Smith was not, hey, that's a great move. It wasn't, hey, that's a bad move. It wasn't, gee, I wonder if this is going to work out. My first reaction was, thank goodness. This means no Bakhtiari in New York. So I was delighted to hear that. Smith, of course, look, this is a high-risk move. There's no question about it. When you miss 37 games in the last 4 years and you're in your mid-30s, there are question marks that come with this. This is a move that there's no guarantee it's going to work out. Look, you're a Jets fan. I don't need to tell you that some of these high-profile moves don't work out. You're always excited in the spring, and it's a question of how the guy plays in the fall. But if we're talking about upside here, there's probably no move the Jets could have made this offseason at the tackle position that has more upside. But even more interesting is the financials actually look like the Jets did a pretty good job with the contract. We're just talking about risk versus the risk that they took on financially. Now, there's risk to dedicating your position to Smith when you talk about his health profile, but the contract could be up to $20 million for 1 year. But the operative phrase is up to. Only $6.5 million is guaranteed, according to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. The other $13.5 million are incentives, and that's what you want when you're bringing in a guy who's an injury question mark. You don't want to pay a lot guarantees, because if Smith hits all the incentives, he's going to be well worth the $20 million, because he's going to be one of the best tackles in football. When he's healthy, he's still one of the 5 best tackles in the NFL. He's a guy who is a rock solid player on your offense. He's a guy you just don't have to worry about it. He's going to win his assignment. He's going to make everybody around him better. And look, the Jets still face a lot of challenges. There's still things they have to fix this offseason, and they still don't have a ton of resources to do it. But all you Jets fans, you were panicking earlier in the week, and I try not to be like an "I told you so" kind of guy, But I'm going to sit here and say it. I kept saying it's not always the first couple days of free agency where the big moves happen. Sometimes you wait around and something comes along. And perhaps this is the first step forward for the New York Jets. 2023 was a disaster offseason. I hated almost everything the Jets did that offseason because they didn't, they talked about trying to win, but they weren't making moves to win. Yet they were taking on a lot of they're making a lot of financial mistakes. If you're going to go all in, go all in. And the New York Jets, by getting Tyron Smith, this is a big move. This is the type of move that could really move the needle for this team. Anyway, that's all for this special edition of Locked On Jets. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Tune in on Monday. We'll be back with our regularly scheduled show where we will break down Tyron Smith in even more detail.